As I gripped the steering wheel, the chill of the night settled deep into my bones. The dense forest on either side of the winding road was a wall of shadow, shrouding me in darkness. My headlights cut through the inky black, revealing the ominous silhouettes of gnarled trees and the occasional glint of eyes in the underbrush. I was driving alone, far from the comforting glow of city lights, and I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. I had always been the adventurous type, relishing the thrill of the unknown. But this road was different. It was a narrow, desolate stretch that seemed to go on forever. My GPS had lost signal miles ago, and my cell phone had become nothing more than a paperweight. I had only taken this route because I thought it would be a shortcut to my destination, but now it felt like a trap, leading me deeper into an abyss of solitude. The trees leaned over the road like menacing sentinels, their branches clawing at the roof of my car. Every rustle of leaves and distant howl of a lone wolf sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't help but glance in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see something lurking in the darkness behind me. Nothing was there, just an endless void. I turned up the volume on my car radio, trying to drown out the unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. But instead of soothing music, all I heard was static, punctuated by strange, distorted voices that seemed to whisper my name. Panic gnawed at the edges of my mind as I fumbled to turn it off, but the voices persisted, like a chorus of demons taunting me. My heart pounded as I continued down the desolate road, the isolation closing in on me like a vice. I longed for the reassuring presence of another car or a sign of civilization, but there was nothing. Just the endless, winding road and the eerie, ever-present forest. And then, as if to add to my growing sense of dread, I noticed something in the distance, a flickering light, like a beacon in the night. Hope surged through me and I sped up, desperate for any sign of life. As I got closer, I could make out the shape of an old, run-down gas station, its neon sign sputtering and barely illuminating the cracked pavement. I pulled into the station, the gravel crunching beneath my terrace. The building seemed abandoned, but I had no other options. I needed gas and I needed to gather my wits. As I stepped out of my car, the biting cold of the night hit me like a wave. The air was heavy, with the scent of decay, and a low, mournful wind howled through the trees. The gas station's decrepit appearance sent a chill down my spine. The windows were shattered, and the door hung from one hinge, creaking eerily in the wind. I cautiously entered, the floor covered in shattered glass and debris. The dim, flickering light above revealed an ancient cash register and rows of empty shelves. The place was a ghost town. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to risk exploring further or to get back in my car and drive on. But the needle on my fuel gauge was hovering perilously close to empty, and I had no choice. I had to find some way to refuel and continue my journey. I finally located the fuel pumps outside, and to my surprise, they appeared to be operational. I grabbed the nozzle and began to fill my tank, my breath visible in the frigid air. The howling wind seemed to grow louder, and I could have sworn I heard whispers on the breeze. The sensation of being watched washed over me, and I quickly finished pumping gas. As I turned to leave, the gas station's lights flickered and then went out, plunging me into total darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone, using its feeble flashlight to guide my way back to the car. I hurriedly climbed inside, locked the doors, and tried to start the engine. But nothing happened. The car was dead. Panic set in as I tried to restart the engine, the darkness outside becoming suffocating. I could hear something moving around the gas station, shuffling and scraping along the ground. The eerie whispers grew louder, filling the car with a cacophony of spectral voices. Just as I was about to abandon the car and flee, the gas station's lights flickered back to life and the engine roared to life. I didn't waste a second. I floored the gas pedal and sped away from that accursed place, leaving it behind in a trail of dust and darkness. The road continued to stretch endlessly before me, and the forest loomed menacingly on either side. The eerie experience at the gas station had shaken me to my core, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, lurking in the shadows. The whispers of the night seemed to follow me, a haunting chorus that echoed in my mind. As I drove on through the desolation, I couldn't help but wonder if I had inadvertently stumbled into a nightmare, a place where the line between reality and the supernatural blurred. My heart pounded, and I knew that the night was far from over, and the horrors it held were beyond my wildest imagination. As I approached the desolate stretch of highway, my hands tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles turning white in the glow of the car's dashboard. The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the road, and the only sound was the soft hum of the engine. I had always been nervous about driving at night, but this journey was different. It was a necessary evil, one I couldn't avoid. The radio crackled with static as I searched for a station, desperate for something to break the silence. But the dial seemed stuck on a single frequency, emitting nothing but an unsettling hiss. A shiver ran down my spine, and I glanced nervously in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something lurking in the darkness behind me. The night was foggy, the thick mist obscuring the edges of the road, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. I had driven this route countless times during the day, but at night it felt like an entirely different world. My GPS, usually so reliable, seemed to be struggling to keep up, constantly recalculating the route. With each passing mile, my unease grew. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I glanced into the side mirrors, I half expected to see a pair of sinister eyes glaring back at me. The darkness seemed to press in on all sides, like a vice, and I couldn't shake the sense that I was hurtling towards something malevolent. As I drove further into the night, the fog thickened, and I realized I could barely see the road anymore. Panic began to set in, my heart racing as I strained to make out any landmarks. I was tempted to pull over, to wait until morning, but I knew that I couldn't. Time was of the essence, and I had to push on. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I saw it. A figure, barely discernible in the mist, standing on the side of the road. My foot instinctively slammed on the brakes, and the car skidded to a stop. The figure, dressed in tattered rags, didn't move. I couldn't see their face, but I felt their gaze boring into me. With trembling hands, I rolled down the window and called out, "Are you okay?" No response. The figure remained still, like a spectre from another world. Panic welled up inside me, and I fumbled for my phone to call for help. But when I looked up, the figure was gone. Vanished into thin air, I blinked in disbelief, my heart pounding in my chest. Had I imagined it? Was it a trick of the fog? There was no way anyone could have disappeared so quickly. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I continued down the road, my grip on the steering wheel tighter than ever. The fog seemed to grow thicker, wrapping around the car like a shroud. I felt a presence, a malevolence, bearing down on me, and I knew I had to get out of there. I accelerated, my heart racing, the road a blur of uncertainty. But the fog only seemed to close in further, the visibility reduced to almost nothing. I couldn't see the road, the markings, or even the dashboard of my car. Panic set in as I realized I was lost, completely disoriented in this otherworldly darkness. That's when I heard it, a chilling, guttural sound that sent shivers down my spine. It was a voice, or at least something that tried to mimic one. "Turn back," it rasped, a whisper carried on the wind. "Turn back now." My knuckles were white on the steering wheel as I pushed the accelerator to the floor. I had to get out of this place, away from that haunting voice. But the road seemed to stretch endlessly into the night, a nightmarish labyrinth from which there was no escape. The voice grew louder, more insistent, echoing in my mind. "Turn back," it repeated, now sounding more like a chorus of tormented souls. The fog outside the car began to take on strange, shifting shapes, as though it was alive. I could see faces, contorted in agony, swirling in the mist. Desperation overwhelmed me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I closed my eyes and floored the accelerator, praying that I would somehow find my way out of this nightmare. When I finally opened my eyes, I was no longer on the fog-covered highway. I was parked on the shoulder of a well-lit suburban street. The fog was gone, and the night had cleared. My heart still raced, and I felt like I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. I sat there for a long while, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had it all been a hallucination, a product of my overactive imagination? Or had I stumbled upon something truly otherworldly that night? Something that defied explanation? One thing was certain, I would never drive at night again. Not after what I'd... The night was as dark as the inside of a coffin, and the road stretched out before me like a sinuous black snake, disappearing into the inky abyss. I clenched the steering wheel, the leather cold and slippery beneath my trembling hands. My knuckles were ghostly white as the pale glow of the dashboard cast eerie shadows across my face. I was alone, save for the radio's soft, melancholic hum. The rain had begun to fall in thin, silvery sheets, the droplets slashing against the windshield like tiny daggers. My wipers swept back and forth with a hypnotic rhythm, trying to keep pace with the furious storm. My headlights struggled to pierce the oppressive darkness, and the world outside was reduced to a monochrome blur of trees and shadows. I could barely make out the road signs, and the GPS on my phone had long since lost its signal. I'd always been an adventurer, relishing the thrill of the unknown, but tonight was different. A gnawing unease had settled deep in my chest. I had been driving for hours, chasing the promise of a new beginning in a remote town called Blackwood. My new job, a chance to escape the monotony of the city, had led me to this desolate road. The GPS had offered me a shortcut, a winding route through the forest that would save me precious time. But now, with the trees looming on either side like silent sentinels, I was filled with regret. Suddenly, the engine sputtered and the car came to an abrupt stop. I muttered a curse and pounded the steering wheel in frustration. I knew I should have checked the gas tank before setting out on this desolate journey. With a resigned sigh, I reached for my phone, intending to call for help, but the screen remained stubbornly black. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I was completely cut off from the world. The relentless rain continued to beat down, filling the car with a disconcerting chorus of soft drumming. I shivered, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. I glanced around, desperate for any sign of life, but the road was empty, the forest impenetrable. As I debated my next move, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. A faint light, like a distant star, flickered through the trees. I seized the chance and grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment. Clambering out of the car, I trudged through the rain-soaked underbrush, guided only by that elusive flicker of light. The forest seemed to come alive with sinister whispers, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin, the source of the flickering light. Its windows were shattered and the door hung askew on rusty hinges. It was as if this place had been forgotten by time itself. The strange sensation of dread intensified as I entered the cabin, my flashlight casting eerie patterns on the rotting wood. The air was damp and musty, the remnants of some long-forgotten life. My footsteps echoed through the darkness as I ventured further into the cabin, discovering decaying furniture and shattered memories. A portrait hung on the wall, a family long gone, their faces obscured by time and neglect. My heart raced as I realized this place was a trap, a sinister place that beckoned unsuspecting travelers, never to release them. A sound like a low guttural moan emanated from the shadows. I spun around, my flashlight trembling in my hand, casting wild beams of light. The room seemed to shift, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. Panic welled up inside me, but there was no escape. I stumbled backward, but the door had vanished, replaced by a solid wall of rotting wood. I tried to call out, to scream for help, but my voice was choked by fear. The cabin had me in its clutches, a malevolent force that relished my terror. The walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and the moans grew louder, now accompanied by the sound of shuffling footsteps. I turned and fled deeper into the cabin, the darkness pressing in around me. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving me in total darkness. I reached out, feeling the clammy, decaying walls with my trembling hands. The walls seemed to be alive, pulsating with a terrible, otherworldly energy. I couldn't see a way out, and the footsteps drew nearer, the moans growing louder. The fear was suffocating, and I could feel something sinister and unseen, closing in on me. I stumbled over something on the floor, and my fingers brushed against a weathered journal. Desperation forced me to read its pages in the dark. The journal told a tale of a lost soul, just like me, who had stumbled upon this cursed cabin. It spoke of a malevolent spirit that inhabited these woods, a spirit that thrived on fear and despair. The journal's final entry was chilling. It described the author's descent into madness, their last words a plea for someone, anyone, to free them from this eternal nightmare. My heart pounded, and I realized that I was not alone in this cabin. The malevolent spirit had me in its grasp, and there was no escape. The footsteps drew closer, and the moans became deafening, a cacophony of terror. In the pitch-black darkness, I whispered my own plea for help, but I knew there was no one to hear. The cabin had claimed me, and I would be its prisoner, just like the lost soul who had written that journal. As the footsteps closed in, I couldn't help but wonder if anyone would ever find my journal, a testament to the horror that lurked in the dark corners of the world, waiting for unsuspecting travelers to fall into its clutches.